This session will be about the book of Joshua. Joshua begins the historical books of the Old Testament, and especially the books of Joshua through 2 Kings are what is known in the Hebrew Bible as the former prophets, because of the emphasis on prophets and prophecy in these books. In many ways, the book of Deuteronomy is the introduction to these books of Joshua through 2 Kings, and these books have a lot in common with both the vocabulary and the themes and the special emphases of the book of Deuteronomy, and more will be said about this throughout the course. Let's talk for a moment about the outline of the book of Joshua. Joshua has a fairly simple outline. Chapters 1 through 12 dealing with Joshua's wars in Canaan. Chapters 13 through 21 dealing with the allotment of the tribal territories to the various tribes of Israel. And then chapters 22 through 24, several appendices, especially some speeches by Joshua ending the book. Let's look a little more in detail at these. First, chapters 1 through 12. Chapter 1, Joshua addresses the people on the eve of bringing them across the Jordan to begin taking the promised land. Chapter 2 is the account of the spies that go to Jericho to spy out the territory to see about the possibility of taking it for Israel, and of course the famous story of Rahab the harlot, who puts her lot in with Israel against the Canaanites who lived in Jericho. The picture here is of an archaeological site at Tel Es Sultan, which is biblical Jericho, and it's a depiction of a tower there of ancient Jericho. Chapters 3 through 5 discuss the crossing of the Jordan River, setting up a number of stones as a memorial at a place called Gilgal, which simply means circle, maybe circle of stones, and the dedication of those stones and the people there in Israel's first camp in Gilgal. Chapter 6 is the account of the war against Jericho, the taking of Jericho. Of course, they're commanded to walk around the city once each day for 6 days, and then the seventh day to walk around the city 7 days, blowing trumpets. At the end of 7 days, the walls fall down, and the Israelites take the city as a gift without really having to fight a battle. This is the emphasis in the books of Deuteronomy and Joshua. When Israel is faithful, God gives them the land as a gift. When they are unfaithful, then no matter how hard they may try, the land is not given to them. That is why the two stories of Jericho and then the following chapters, chapters 7 and 8, the account of Ai, a small town compared to Jericho, that they're unable to take because of the presence of sin in the camp. And so most of these accounts in the battles of Joshua, chapters 1 through 12, most of the chapters deal with Jericho, where they faithfully take the city, a big city, walled city, and the Lord gives it to them as a gift. And then chapters 7 and 8, they are unsuccessful at Ai because of the presence of sin in the camp by Achan and his family. Chapter 9 is the covenant with the Gibeonites. That is, Gibeon, a major Canaanite city not far from Jericho and Ai. On a ruse, they tricked the Israelites by coming to them with moldy bread and shoes that were worn out and clothes that were worn out, saying that they had traveled a long distance in order to make a treaty with the Israelites. And only after Joshua has made the treaty with them does he recognize and realize that they're from down the road. They're from very close. And so he subjects the Gibeonites to forced labor, and they must draw water and hew wood for the Israelites because of their trickery. Chapter 10 is the campaign to the south. That is the war with the kings of Jerusalem, Lachish, Debir, and quite a few other southern Canaanite cities. They heard that the Gibeonite coalition of cities, which was a large group, had gone over to Israel's side, and so they come out to war against Joshua and pick a fight with him. Joshua makes a circuit of all their cities, ends up defeating their armies and taking their cities. Chapter 11 is the northern campaign to the city of Hatzor in the far north. Hatzor was probably the most important royal city of the Canaanites at that time, and it was the leader of the coalition of Canaanite city-states. They also pick a fight with Joshua, and a coalition of cities in the far north come to do battle. Joshua goes up to the north. They engage the people of the armies of Hatzor and defeat the armies of Hatzor at that time, destroy the city and burn it to the ground as they had done at Jericho and Ai. Let me say something in interpretation of these battles. First, the southern campaign, or rather the central campaign, were the cities of Jericho and Ai, and taking the Gibeonite coalition to be slaves. Those are in the areas known later as northern Judah and Benjamin, in the center of the country. Chapter 10 is the southern campaign, where a series of 8 or 10 cities are taken by Joshua when they come out to do battle against Joshua. And then chapter 11, the northern campaign against the city of Hatzor and its coalition of kings to the far north. And that is, Joshua records 3 campaigns: central, southern, and northern. By far, not all the cities, the Canaanite cities of Canaan, came out to do battle, and by a long shot was not all of the country was taken, but rather these cities represented the 3 regions of Canaan: the central area, the south, and the north. And Joshua plants the flag in all 3 areas. But the majority of the land, in fact, is not taken, because we see this very clearly in Judges chapter 1. After Joshua's death, the majority of the land is not taken. In fact, we see it in Joshua 13. The majority of the land is not taken. And so after Joshua's death, the tribes are encouraged, exhorted to go to battle against the Canaanites and take the land that the Lord had allotted to them as a gift. Chapter 12 is a list of conquered cities, and so we get several conquered cities. We're told in chapters 10 and 11 that Joshua fought against these cities for a long time, and so our initial reaction is to think, well, these things happened over a few weeks. But I think that we're better off recognizing that the taking of the land of Canaan was a multi-generational thing. It went on for many, many years. In fact, was not finally completed until King David himself succeeded in taking the entire land of Canaan, at least 200 years later and possibly more. This is a sort of a traditional map, our tradition of what we think the tribal allotments of Israel would have looked like. One caveat, Joshua 13 and Judges 1 say that many of the tribes were not faithful in carrying out a holy war and taking the land, that most of them were unfaithful and lived alongside of the Canaanites. And so this is an ideal map, not a map of reality, at least until the period of probably Saul and especially David. Chapters 13 through 19, the territorial allotment of the 12 tribes. Chapter 20 and 21, the cities of refuge, and this is a map of the 6 cities of refuge where the accidental manslayer could flee and find some safety and security against the avenging relatives of the dead person, until such a time as a court case could be heard to establish his guilt or innocence. And also in chapter 21, many Levitical cities. The tribe of Levi did not have tribal territory per se, but only certain cities that were allotted to them to live in. Then finally, chapters 22 through 24, the appendices. Chapter 22, almost a civil war between the Transjordanian tribes, that is, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh to the east of the Jordan River, almost engaged in civil war against the other tribes to the west of the Jordan because of a misunderstanding. They were all supposed to help each other take their tribal allotments. Those to the west did not understand that the tribes to the east were in fact going to do it. They were not going to skip out on that responsibility, but they misinterpreted. And so there is peace between them, and a memorial is raised for in celebration of their peace. Chapter 23 and 24, a final speech by Joshua, and the covenant renewal at Shechem. Why did the covenant need to be renewed? Well, I think very possibly it is because of elements in Israel that had not been with them at Sinai, or had not been with them in the wilderness, had not been with them in Egypt, but became allied with them, like the Gibeonites, in the taking of the land, like also Rahab the harlot, became counted as Israelites. And so a covenant is necessary with them. Also, it is interesting where this covenant renewal happens. It happens at Shechem, which we're never told in Scripture since Genesis 34 that the city of Shechem had to be fought for by Israel. Once Levi and Simeon had taken the city of Shechem in Genesis 34, it seems to simply have belonged to Israel, because Joshua goes there, there's no record of any fight, and it may be, we're speculating, but it may be that relatives of the Israelites lived in the city of Shechem, and that was a logical place for the covenant renewal to happen, since those people would not have been in the wilderness or at Sinai or in Egypt. Let's talk about some of the themes. I've already raised these in some detail already, but let's wrap this up with some of the themes of Joshua. The main theme of Joshua: when the people were faithful to God and obeyed, the land and the covenant blessings were theirs as a gift. This is exemplified in the 2 battles which take up most of Joshua 1 through 12. The stories of Jericho, where they're faithful and the land is given as a gift, and the story of Ai, where they were unfaithful and they were defeated, therefore, in battle and lost territory. This, in fact, is going to be also the main theme of the books of Joshua through 2 Kings. when the people were guilty especially of idolatry, then they were unsuccessful, they lost territory, they were unsuccessful in battle, and eventually, through persistence in idolatry, would lose the entire land and go into exile. I've mentioned already the three military campaigns. That is the central campaign, chapters 6 through 9, Jericho, Ai, and the Gibeonite coalition. The southern campaign against the southern kings in chapter 10, and the northern campaign against the coalition of northern kings led by the king of Hatzor in chapter 11. The meaning of these three military campaigns, I think, is that Joshua planted the flag. He made beachheads, let's say, in each of the three geographical regions of the country, and therefore the book of Joshua could say he took the whole land, while much of the land remained to be taken in Joshua 13 and Judges 1. Also, another way of looking at these passages is through the means of telescoping. Many of the battles attributed to Joshua may not have actually been fought explicitly by him, but by his successors. But through telescoping, like a telescope allows you to see things far off, but see them close up, so what may have taken many generations are attributed to Joshua through this device. To say, ideally, Joshua took the entire land of Canaan, while very overtly, Joshua 13 and Judges 1 say that the whole land was not taken. Much of it, we're told, remained to be possessed. So I think what we see in Joshua is the ideals. When Israel's faithful, they take the land. When they're unfaithful, they are not allowed to be given the land as a gift for God to fight their battles for them. Doesn't happen. They lose whatever land they have possessed already. When they are faithful, then the land and its blessings are theirs. A couple of other issues that need to be raised. Joshua and Judges are very difficult in terms of how to reconstruct them historically. How exactly do the books of Joshua and Judges line up with what we know of history and what we know of archaeological digs in Israel? Well, it's difficult to know, and archaeology most often proves archaeology and does not necessarily, most of the time, either confirm or detract from the biblical message. The archaeological evidence is equivocal. For example, there's not enough left of the mound at Jericho for us to really make a firm statement one way or the other about whether the mound we call Jericho today, in fact, was the biblical Jericho or not, and whether Joshua fought that battle sometime around 1200 BC or not. Much of what has been done in the past is not available for verification these days because it's in the West Bank. What has been excavated there is subject to a lot of erosion and decay, and so is difficult to know. In the same way, Ai simply means the ruin, and we don't know that what we think of is the ruin, the Ai today. We don't know if that in fact is the particular ruin associated with Joshua's battle or not. What we do know is there are very few signs of radical destruction at the time of Joshua. We do know that the city of Hatzor was annihilated around 1200 BC through archaeological work and through comparison with biblical text. We're not sure because the evidence is equivocal at Jericho and Ai. We do think that the city of Lachish was annihilated around this time, and we really don't have any other examples of total destruction in cities in Canaan at this time. And so that led many to say maybe the conquest model that Israel came to be in possession of the Promised Land through primarily military conquest may not be the best model. And so they suggested gradual infiltration, that it was only through a lengthy process, that Israel came to be in possession of the land. Well, that may correspond with the archaeological record, that it was a slow development, and would be more in line with Judges chapter 1, chapter 2, and Joshua 13 than the picture of conquest we get in Joshua 1 through 12. Also, the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 7 and other places says, "Little by little I will drive them out, says the Lord." And so we even have evidence from Deuteronomy that it would not be a quick process, but rather lengthy. And so some have said the primary way that Israel came to be in possession of the land of Canaan was through gradual settlement. So the gradual settlement model, rather than the conquest model, has been espoused by many scholars. Finally, there is a more recent theory, and that is the primary mechanism for taking the land of Israel was through peasant revolt, through the poor people rising up and throwing off the shackles of the oppressive landowners and siding with a small group of Israelites in order to take the land of Canaan. So primarily through peasant revolt. Well, we do have a little of this. Rahab the harlot cast her lot in with Israel. The Gibeonite coalition came over to Israel, and then in Judges chapter 1, the unnamed man of Bethel opened up the back door of the city to let Israel in to take the city of Bethel in Judges chapter 1. And so we have a little bit of this, but is it the primary mechanism? Well, some have thought so. I think we're in good wisdom to look at all three of these models and say, did they conquer the land? Yes, they did. Did they conquer the land by destroying all the cities? Of course not. Very few cities were destroyed, and in fact, Deuteronomy says God is going to give them the land, cities you did not build and vineyards you did not plant. It makes little sense for them to destroy the cities and cut down trees and uproot vineyards that were already there, that they're going to be living in. And so one ought not to expect to find very many destruction layers in the archaeological record. One should expect that in Deuteronomy it says a very slow process of gradual infiltration, gradual settlement, that also is the case. And also some Canaanites came to side with Israel and to be counted as Israelites. So all three of these. One last issue, and that is the covenant of blessings and curses in Joshua 8 and the covenant renewal in Joshua 24. Deuteronomy chapters 27 and 28 says that when you come into the land of Canaan, speaking to Israel, then you will go to two mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. They're close to Shechem in the middle of the country. And half the people will stand on one mountain and half on the other mountain, and one half will yell these blessings in Deuteronomy 27 and 28, and the other half will yell across the curses of the covenant for those who, invoking the curses of the covenant if they do not keep the covenant in Israel. And so this happens in Joshua chapter 8, where after taking the city of Ai, they go to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and in fact do that very thing. They first sacrifice, and then in a symbolic act, the people are separated in two groups, one half on Mount Ebal, one half on Mount Gerizim, and they shout across to each other the blessings and curses of the covenant, as if to say, may Israel be torn asunder, may they be cut in two, as this valley separates Mounts Ebal and Gerizim, if we do not keep the terms of the covenant.